The year was 1979 when Chastity Claire Babcock met and immediately became a married with the producer named Maxwell Sheffield. He was a handsome man from England originally with a very elegant English accent. She was all of 18 and fresh out of the best of private schools that her parents' money could buy. It was on one of her many trips to the Sheffield home that she met the Sheffield butler named Niles. He was the most irritating person she had ever met and seemed to go out of his way to make her life miserable. Most people called her CC and she tried to keep her real name hidden from the general public. It was a disgusting name and she had been picked on her whole life because of it. Her eyes were only on Maxwell Sheffield as she considered Niles below herself, and besides that he was very hateful toward her. The problem was that Max and his wife Sarah had just had a little girl they named Maggie, and another child was on the way. No matter what she thought, she knew that Sarah and Max were very much in love. She had class and a very kind demeanor. To top it off, she was beautiful and took care of her own children with only help from Niles. A dog-eater, she thought to herself. Sarah was her best friend and she hated acting like she didn't like Max. She had to keep up the air and watch their life from far away. He was so handsome. Sarah and CC would spend hours at the country clubs together and they worked on many charity events. Max left them to do most of the charity events as he worked the production parts. Sometimes CC wondered if Max needed her as anything more than a secretary. No, this will not happen. Someday I will have a full partnership in his business. Not only did CC detest the fact that Max was married, she detested the fact that there now was a child and another on the way. The last thing she was interested in was having a baby. They were dirty, cried all the time and always were in need of attention. CC was the one that wanted the attention, all of it. Time went by and 2 other children were born, Bryton and Grace. CC now spent most of her time socializing and building an empire for her producer Maxwell. She had basically given up on Max. She was certainly not interested in a married man with 3 children. Niles continued as the butler and did everything he could do to make sure that she knew that he disliked her. One time tied a spoon to her scarf, another time he called the limo for her and sent her to the wrong airport, and another time he left her outside waiting for hours at the wrong TV studio. All the time Mr. Sheffield was being seen and getting all of the attention. Then, the worst thing that could happen to a married man happened. His wife Sarah died, leaving the love of her life free once again. She would have to be careful and not work too fast, but he could be hers again. The kids, well, she could have them sent off to private schools and then her and Max could be a couple. A year went by and the kids went through Nanny after Nanny, and Niles was actually getting better at the cuts he would get in whenever he had a chance. Max had moved his office back into the mansion so that he could be near his children. Then one day the most obnoxious person she had ever met came into her life. Her name was Fran Fine. She was brash, loud and had a voice that could go straight through your bones. She wore clothes too short and loud for CC, who was much more conservative. Although Fran did not divulge her age, CC thought she was about her age 32. CC continued trying to get Max's attention, and to her horror he seemed more interested in the new nanny Fran than her and Niles. Well, he loved it. Every single time he had a chance he would get a dig in. He left her outside again on the patio and shut the lights off, leaving her in the rain. He offered a broom so that she could fly to England. He teased her all of the time, sent her on trips to the wrong place, anything and everything. It was so bad that sometimes she had to look to her back to make sure Niles wasn't doing anything to her. Time was now against her. She was approaching the age of 38 and she had never married. Oh, there had been dates but no serious ones, and when she thought Max might be getting interested, instead of kissing her he had given her a dog. A dog. She was so humiliated she realized that perhaps Max was not going to be for her. And then of all things, Max and Fran got married and Fran and Max were expecting twins. CC was so depressed that she had to go into the hospital for treatment of her depression. While in the hospital she found herself surprisingly thinking of Niles of all people. She actually missed him and all his little pranks that he would pull on her. CC stopped thinking of that noon man and think of how to get a good man. One with character, she thought to herself. Finally CC got out of the hospital and she arrived back at the Sheffield home once more. She now was the full partner was Max and got to see Niles every day for hours at a time. Little by little she was falling for Niles. He was even getting to the point where every once in a while he would be kind to her. CC was not going to allow this kind of thinking. Niles was a butler. He had no stature in the community and no money. He would never be anything but a butler. However, he was cute and would keep the house clean. The family had gone to a party, and to CC's surprise Niles asked her to marry him. They had had a couple of intimate moments, but he had not given any indication that he was interested in her in that special kind of way. My God, what is he thinking? Fran, I know that she has something to do with this. Ever since Fran and Max had caught them in bed together, Fran had been pushing Niles and her together. That was not going to work on her. No, she was too smart. Every time CC turned around, Niles was bothering her. She couldn't move without him being around. He still slung some slurs at her, but now they were mostly loving words. Oh God, she thought to herself. Months went by and the twins were due any moment. CC knew that once the twins were born, Fran would keep Niles very busy, and she wasn't sure about how she felt about it. She wasn't feeling well herself and seemed to be losing weight. CC was getting sick nearly every morning, and sometimes in the evening she didn't feel that well either. The smell of coffee really bothered her. What is wrong, she thought. Then it hit her. OMG, am I pregnant? Niles called her to let her know that Fran had gone into labor and the twins were on their way. She decided while she was at the hospital she would stop at the lab. They could run a test and find out what was wrong. It was there that she found out that in 7 months there would be a little Niles Jr. I don't even know his last name. CC came into the delivery room with Max, Fran and Niles and asked to speak to Niles alone. They went out together where CC had decided she would give him the news. You know that for the last few weeks I have had the flu. Well, I stopped at the lab and had some tests run. Niles, I'm pregnant. CC told him. Then we must get married. I will take care of you and our children. No more nasty comments, I promise. Niles told her. Niles went and got the preacher, and the wedding ceremony was performed in the delivery room just as the twins were being born. It was there that CC and the rest of the clan found out what his real name, Melvin. Even Max didn't know his legal name. They also found out what CC's real name. It was all they could do to stop from laughing. That night CC and Niles bedded down in CC's condo. Max would have to get used to him not being at his home 24/7 as he had always done. There was going to be a lot of change, CC thought to herself. For a long time CC and Maxwell had been thinking about moving to California where they could produce movies as well as television, and this seemed to be a good time to make that change. There were 2 new children at the Sheffield home and Maggie had gotten married. Now, Bryden wanted to tour Europe for the summer. The time was perfect, and with any luck they could be all moved before I get too big. CC and Niles found a home in the Bel Air township. It was a mansion with 19 rooms, and Niles found it odd that he would have a butler. Besides the town car that they owned, Niles bought himself BMW convertible. This would make the many trips to Malibu to the Sheffields more interesting. The California coastal road was a beautiful ride with the top down. Niles looked around at his new house and liked what he saw. The baby would have a large nursery just down the hall from them, and the nanny would be in the room next to the baby. On the 3rd floor there were 5 rooms for the servants to use if they chose to live in the home. That was the best thing for the new family, and the wages could be cheaper also. The mansion came with a pool, a spa, a 5-car garage, many gardens, and over 5 acres of land. They had 5 horses, a stableman, a butler, 3 maids, all full-time. Once the baby was born they would also have a nanny. CC was 4 months along when she came to the doctor's office for her visit. It was at this month that usually a patient would have an ultrasound. CC and Niles had heard the baby's heartbeat, and now it was time to actually see the baby. The nurse took CC and Niles into a small room and had Fran lie down on an examination table. CC looked over at a monitor and looked at what looked to her like a miniature baby. The nurse ran an instrument over her belly, and all of a sudden you could see and hear the heartbeat. "Do you want to know the sex of the baby?" she asked. Niles looked over at his wife and shook his head yes. It would make it so much easier when planning the nursery and purchasing baby clothes if they knew what the baby was. CC looked at Niles and knew that he wanted to know the sex badly. She had an urge to say no, but thought that she would like to know also. Yes, we would like to know if you can tell us, she said. The nurse looked at the baby and ran the instrument up and down and told them, congratulations, you are to be the proud parents of a little girl in 4 months and 12 days according to these images. She looks healthy and weighs approximately 6 ounces at this present time. A girl? Oh, how wonderful! I can hardly wait for her to be born. Everything in her room will be perfect with tons of pink things. Niles said proudly. We can now hire someone to decorate her room and get ready for the big day. It takes time to get a good decorator. CC worried. Niles couldn't wait to call Fran and Max over for a dinner. He knew that they would be very interested in the ultrasound. Even though Max had been his employer, they had been the best of friends for nearly 20 years. He called and Max and Fran agreed to come over for dinner that evening. CC and Niles had just taken a seat in their living room when the doorbell rang. Niles started to get up to answer the door as a matter of habit and sat back down as his butler went to answer the door and announce that Fran and Max had arrived with the twins. CC had to admit that they were getting cute and the little smiles on their faces was heartwarming. We have an announcement to make. We went to the doctor's office and had an ultrasound. We are having a girl. CC announced as she showed them the ultrasound. There were many congratulations and hugs all around. It was some very exciting news to everyone. Fran sure didn't think that this would ever happen, and either did Max. The days that followed were busy with the new decorator and all the plans, and then they had to find themselves a nanny. CC was not going to let her little girl be taken care of by someone like Fran. Their little girl was going to have nothing but the best. After all, she would have to spend some time with her, and she wanted to have a well-behaved baby. Do you have ideas for the baby's name? Is there anyone that you would like to name the baby after? Niles asked her. There isn't anyone special that I would like to name her after, however, I do have a couple of ideas for names. I was thinking of Jessica Ann, Diane May, or Gail Irene. CC offered. Those names don't sound too bad to me. I was thinking of the names Julie Irene, Lori May, or Stephanie Gale. CC offered. CC was beginning to feel like she was carrying more than one baby. The morning sickness had gone, but now the baby was kicking and rolling around at all hours. She hadn't had a good night's sleep in weeks and was getting really tired. The doctor advised both she and Niles that this was normal and to take it easy. It was a Saturday afternoon and CC had just sat down at her computer when the phone rang. It was Fran, and she said that it was necessary that she and Niles come right over. There was something important that she and Max needed to discuss with them. Niles and CC took the convertible as it was a very hot day and the top down would make the trip fun. It did tend to mess up their hair, but who cared? They were on their way to their best friend's house. When they arrived at the Sheffield house, the butler parked their car for them. It was a nice gesture as CC was having a hard time getting in and out of the car now. CC and Niles went into the home and was surprised to find a room full of people all set up for a baby shower. CC's mother had come all the way from New York, and several of their friends that they hadn't seen in years came as a surprise. They received everything that a baby could ever wish for, and everything was Gucci. CC had asked that people buy Gucci so that their daughter would have everything from the same designer. She got a beautiful stroller carriage combination with a car seat from Max and Fran and several different dresses, diapers, everything their little girl could ever want. Her mother offered to stay for 2 weeks after the baby was born to help take care of her. What is she talking about helping with the baby? She never even changed a diaper in her life, CC thought to herself. Out loud she said, "Thank you, mother." CC's brother gave her one of the biggest surprises, offering the title to the horse that she had lost in a bet with him years ago. A bet that she wouldn't forget. She had bet with him that Fran would never get onto a game show, and she did. She lost her horse that day. The baby was due in just 3 weeks and CC and Niles had to finish their list. They had decided to name the baby Julie Ann Niles, and the nanny would be moving in next week. Niles had done the hiring and had found a very capable lady in her 30s who would be working 50 days a week. On the weekends they had found another lady who would not live in the house. I am worried about the weekends. Who will get up with the baby in the middle of the night? CC worried. Don't worry about that. I have experience in that area, and although it can be trying at points, it is well worth it to see the baby smiling up at you. Niles told her and kissed her tenderly. CC hadn't been feeling good all day and was walking around trying to some work on a new production when she got her first twinge of pain. Now CC wasn't one to handle pain very well and she nearly doubled over. She yelled to Niles, who came running. After talking to the nurse on the phone, it was decided that CC had ample time, so she decided to call her friend Fran to come over. Fran had become a friend to her now that they lived in California and would be good company for her. Max would come over and keep with Niles, who seemed to be a nervous wreck. Fran and Max came over and took a seat in the living room. They seemed to be just looking at CC, they were driving CC mad. "Will you please go and do something, Niles? You and Max go ahead into the man cave," she told them. Once the men had left the room, Fran looked at the suitcase that CC had packed. CC had chosen the prettiest red checkered dress with a matching hat. She had a little handmade blanket that would fit right into the car seat fine. Fran and CC spent the morning watching the game shows when just before noon CC's water broke. That is when things started to really move and she knew that it was time for them to head over to the hospital. They arrived at the hospital and had all gone into one of the delivery rooms. It was modern and even had a birthing tub that CC could use if she wishes. "Oh no, no natural birth for me. Give me something for the pain now," CC yelled. For over 5 hours CC labored. Fran held her hand and Niles and Max paced and held her hand, and at 5:15 that evening little Julie Ann was born, 6 pounds 10 ounces and 19 inches long. Everyone gave out a big sigh of relief when she came out yelling. Like her daddy and mommy, she had blonde hair and blue eyes. The nanny's name was Rachel and she came right over to the hospital to meet her new ward. She had raised 2 other children and was looking to raising this one. The last 2 children she had had from the age of 2 until they went off to boarding school. "I hope that I get to do the same with this little girl. CC is a little odd, but Niles was cool," she thought to herself. CC looked at the baby she was holding and actually felt love for her. She thought that this little being that she was holding was hers and that she would be the best mother she could possibly be. If nothing else, Niles and her would become great parents. As Niles and CC got into the limo to take Julie home, they smiled at each other. Their family was complete and they were on their way to a new life together.